way to my Father, but I will return.
Now, the Arabs who propagated Islam and the Europeans who spread Christianity permitted and engaged the practice of slavery, even though Jesus and Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon them, absolutely forbade slavery, which had been prevalent in the world for thousands of years due to the proliferation of the teachings of Yaqub. According to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Yaqub attracted his followers with the promise that he would make others serve them. So this mindset had taken hold among the people by the time Jesus appeared, and that was 2,000 years ago. Now, regarding the Arabs' use of Islam to enslave the black people of Africa, the authors state, when the Muslims invaded Africa, they contributed greatly to the development of the institution of slavery by seizing women for their harems and men for military and menial service. By purchasing as well as by conquest, the Muslims recruited African slaves and shipped them off to Arabia, Persia, and some other Islamic land. As kings and princes embraced Islam, they cooperated with the Arabians in the exportation of human cargo. Long before the extensive development of the slave trade by Europeans, many of the basic practices of the international slave trade had already been established. Now, I only disagree with the authors in their use of the terms Muslims and Islam. The more appropriate terms is Arabs, specifically those Caucasian people who came from the island of Patmos after they were grafted. Now, in the prophecy of the brutal enslavement of black people living in Africa, European, Arab, and African leaders had a hand in it. And this prophecy is stated in the Bible. In the book of Genesis, it states, "And he, God, said unto Abraham, Know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. Now, since black people have been in bondage in the Americas at the hands of Caucasian people, then it should have been expected that Christianity would be forced on us, not as a religion per se, but as an extension of the Caucasian captors' dominance over us. How many black clergy have considered this reality? Obviously, if we're in bondage to serve somebody, then what they give us is part of our service to them, and that includes religion. So how many of you who preach Christianity have thought deeply about who you are and what you're really doing? Again, let us read from Slavery to Freedom. It states, in the following year, 1662, Virginia took another step towards slavery by indicating in its laws that children born in the colony would be held in bond or free according to the condition of the mother. Some mitigation of slavery was intended by a 1667 law, indicating that slaves could be baptized as Christians. In order to protect the institution of slavery, however, this law provided that, quote, the conferring of baptism doth not alter the condition of the person as to his bondage or freedom. Thus, diverse masters, freed from this doubt, may more carefully endeavor the propagation of Christianity. In other words, you can be a Christian and still a slave at the same time. Although Jesus said you'll know the truth and you'll be set free. Now, when questioned about feeding his slaves pork instead of beef, it was recorded that one slave master replied, simply because it would raise a revolt sooner than all the whiplashes ever braided in Massachusetts. Fat pork and cornbread is the natural aliment of a Negro. Deprive him of these and he is miserable. Give him his regular and the Negro enjoys heaven on earth. Well, it might be argued by some of us today that we have failed to prove the slave master is wrong, that the slave master was wrong. Now, in 1859, one Caucasian physician stated the following: fatty articles of diet are peculiarly appropriate on account of their heat-producing properties, and fatback and pork are the most nourishing of all foods for the Negro. Well, if his words were true, this would make fatback more nourishing than fruits and vegetables. Now, in the Torah of the Old Testament, Almighty God forbids us to eat pork, also known as swine. Almighty God commands in the Bible, he states, "And the swine, because it divideth the hoof, yet cheweth not the cud, it is unclean unto you. Ye shall not eat of their flesh, nor touch their dead carcass." So the Caucasian leaders who made us Christians as slaves were breaking the law of God by enslaving us and by feeding us divinely prohibited animals. Well, for example, what makes pork or swine unclean? Now, that would be a good question. If God said this animal was unclean to Moses, then how is this same animal all of a sudden clean when Jesus shows up 2,000 years later? If God said don't eat that pus-filled animal 4,000 years ago, what makes it not pus-filled today? It's the same animal. Well, Master Fard Muhammad, through the supreme wisdom lessons, brought exceptional light to the question of why swine is unclean. He states, "It is known to the medical profession," they know it, "and all wise Muslim sons, that poison animal," that's what he called it, "sounds the mental power 1/60th of an ounce per every 10 ounces of poison animal. If the average person contains 7½ ounces of brain, then Mr. Muhammad wants to know how long will it take to sound the 7½ ounces at the above eating rates. The average person can be robbed successfully with 1/3 of unsound brain. Then how long will a devil have to wait to rob of said the poison animal eater at the above rates?" Now, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad stated that eating this rambunctious, foul, and filthy animal also makes us take on these same characteristics. You are what you eat. Now, I want to examine an article, a recent article, because it concisely explains the house cleaning of what I called the elephant in the room in a previous message. Let's consider this. The House of Representatives has voted to repeal a 2002 resolution authorizing the U.S. to wage war on Iraq. The law was used by the Trump administration to justify the recent drone killing of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. The House voted 236 to 166 to kill the 2002 authorization for military force, AUMF, on Iraq, with 11 Republicans joining the Democrats to vote in favor, and 2 Democrats bucking their party to oppose it. The 2002 AUMF was drafted during the presidency of George W. Bush to authorize the 2003 invasion of Iraq and has been used by subsequent administrations to continue military activity in the country. This is 18 years later, right? Most recently to justify the U.S. drone assassination, again, of Irani General Qasem Soleimani in Baghdad earlier this month. Rather than as a separate measure, the repeal resolution was offered as an amendment to a law about World War II commemorative coins, already approved by the Senate. The same was done with a resolution to block President Trump from using federal funds for unauthorized military force against Iran, which also cleared the House floor with a vote of 228 to 175. Though both bills passed the Democratic-controlled House on Thursday, January 30th, they will likely be shot down in the Republican-held Senate, which is currently busy hearing the impeachment case against President Trump. They are likely to be vetoed by President Trump if they ever make it to his desk. Now, I'm going to pause there. You want to repeal an authorization that may have been, but it was not. So I'm not going to even say may have been. It was not just, and it was not relevant in 2002 to justify the U.S. invasion of Iraq. Now that same repeal amendment has to go to the president himself, which means he has to give up power. Why? You expect him to sign that? That just shows you it's a dictatorship.